A lot of dungeon masters don't know the difference between a penalty and a consequence. And that's why some sessions feel like they're tax season, mechanical, joyless, and full of red ink. Hi, I'm Rick. This is Save vs. BS. I've spent countless hours exploiting the intricate layers of tabletop RPGs to help you craft more immersive and honest games. On this channel, you've heard me talk about consequences a lot. But if you've been listening closely, you've probably noticed I also use the word penalty now and then. But they are not the same thing. They are not even close to the same thing. And today, I want to unpack that difference. Because if you can understand where one ends and the other begins, you will run better games. More immersive, more honest, games where the players lean in because the fiction demands it, not because of the rules. Let's get into it. So let's define the terms. A penalty is mechanical. It's rolling at disadvantage. It's a number, a modifier, a rule layer imposed to disincentivize certain behaviors. You're climbing in the rain, well, that's disadvantage. You're swinging from a rope, that's -2. You're encumbered, your movement's cut in half. Penalties are objective. They're usually fair, but they're easy to point to. They come from systems, math, and written guidelines. They're predictable, they're clean, and they're limited. A penalty only applies when someone decides it does, usually the DM. Now, there's nothing wrong with penalties. They keep things grounded. They encourage planning, and they introduce friction. But here's the danger. If you rely too much on penalties to drive your game, the players will learn to game the penalties. They will metagame their way right out of it. They will learn to optimize around the numbers, avoid mechanical risks, and treat the world like a spreadsheet. They won't ask, what would my character do? They'll ask, what's the penalty and how do I avoid it? And when that becomes the table's instinct, you've lost the fiction. A consequence, by contrast, is narrative. It is the result of action. It is the fallout from your decision. Consequences don't care about a rule book. They're not a balancing mechanic. They're just what happens next. You spit in the Duke's face. Well, you just made an enemy for life. You light a torch in a cave full of explosive gases. Boom. You lied to the wrong merchant, and now word's spreading all over town and people don't trust you. No roll, no warning, no table lookups. Just cause and effect. Consequences aren't there to punish. They are there to reflect, to mirror back the choices the players make in a way that feels earned, in a way that feels deserved. They shape the world, they shape the fiction, they create the weight. And here's the key difference. A consequence invites the players to engage with the story. A penalty invites them to avoid a mistake. Am I making sense? God, I hope so. A good penalty makes a player stop and recalculate. Okay, but good consequences make a player sit up straight and go, oh my God. And that OMG, that's the sound of the stakes. It's the sound of the world reacting like it's alive, like it's paying attention. So, you want to change how your players act at the table? Don't give them more penalties, give them real consequences. Burn the bridge, poison the well, make the townsfolk remember what they did last time. When players know the fiction actually reacts to their choices, they act differently. Not because they're scared of a -2 or a disadvantage roll, but because they care what happens next. Here's where things always go sideways. Some DMs confuse the two. They think if a player does something reckless, they should punish them by slapping on a penalty. You acted impulsively, take disadvantage. You didn't think this through, now your AC is lower. You split the party, okay, higher DC for everything. That's lazy. You're not teaching the player anything, you're just taxing them. You're telling them you made a bad move, now the game is harder for you. That's a penalty pretending to be a consequence. But real consequences don't impose difficulty, they create drama. If a player acts impulsively, let that impulse spiral. If they split the party, split the timeline, split the perspective. Let something happen in their absence that they can't undo. If they go loud, let the enemy call for backup. That's not a penalty, that's just what happens next. The story is not fair, and the dice are not just. And when the world reflects that, it feels real. Now, believe you me, I'm not throwing penalties out. I am definitely not doing that. But used right, they are useful. They create tension when skill challenges get too easy. They add texture to conditions. They help sell the weight of the danger. but they have to be transparent. A good penalty should be understood, not discovered after the fact. The player should know you're climbing with one arm, so yeah, disadvantage. You're trying to sneak in full plate armor, so yeah, good luck. You're aiming through fog and rain, -2. These are mechanical consequences for physical limitations, and that's fair and that's fine. Just don't confuse them for outcomes of choices. You don't need a rule to say that the guard is suspicious. The player said something sketchy, that's enough. The guard is now suspicious. You don't need to invent a difficulty class for a potion exploding. They mixed it wrong, and you told them what happens if they mix it wrong. The game isn't math, the math just helps it feel like a game. The rest is storytelling. If a player forgets their torch in the dungeon and I say, okay, take disadvantage on perception, that's a penalty. If I say, you hear something behind you but you can't see it, that's a consequence. Which one do you think they'll remember? Which one do you think will change how they act next time? Which one feels earned and well-deserved? Every time you lean on a consequence over a penalty, you are reinforcing the idea that the world exists outside of the player's character sheet, that it breathes and it responds and it remembers. Your job as the DM is not to punish failure. It is to portray the world that reacts honestly. That means not sparing them from fallout of bad decisions, but not dinging them with math either. It means sometimes they charm the barmaid and they make an enemy of her jealous cousin. Sometimes they rescue the goblin and gain a friend for life. Sometimes they burn the whole village down and get run out of town. That's consequences. It lives, it moves, and it doesn't forget. So next time you find yourself reaching for a -2 penalty, ask yourself, what would the world do instead? Not the rules, not the book, the world. What would it say? What would it remember? What would it change? Because that answer, that consequence, is 10 times more powerful than any modifier. When players stop asking, what's the penalty, and start asking, what happens if I do this, you got them. That's the moment they stop gaming the system and they start living in your world. That's where the real game begins. Make that your goal and I'll help you get there. My name's Rick. This is Save versus BS. Do all the things and I'll see you in the dark.